on the road.
Coming up tonight on the Crypto Nightly News. We made it to Washington and it was a long haul, but on the way we sat down with crypto journalist Byron Gilliam to discuss his article on the future of crypto. That's this week on the Crypto Nightly News. We all know that crypto was the term future of the digital asset compared to last year's survey. Welcome to the Crypto Nightly News with Chris Jerman. Well, we made it to Washington State this week, and it took way longer than I intended it to take. But, long story short, I didn't get much opportunity to give this week's episode the attention it deserves. But, thanks to LumaWealth, we did have enough gas in the tank to sit down with Byron Gilliam, crypto analyst and writer over at Blockworks. He wrote an article last week about the future of crypto and compared it to Henry Morton Stanley's foray into Zanzibar in the 19th century. If you didn't get to read it, it's linked in the description of this video, and I highly recommend you take a look at it. But before you do, here's the interview I had with Byron, and here's what he thinks about the future of crypto. What I wanted to talk to you about, and I think we're still recording, let me just double check. Yeah, we're recording. What I wanted to talk to you about was the article that you wrote, which I saw on Blockworks, talking about the future. You talked about a Zanzibar gentleman that went to Zanzibar and he brought beads and all kinds of tokens with him that he thought he would use as currency, and he couldn't use them as currency. And you equated that to essentially what Bitcoin is to a lot of people, is just this weird thing that nobody gets the value in. You also talk about gold and digital gold and all kinds of different things in this article. And you had a really amazing perspective, I think, on all the different, ways that currency is going to come about. Talking about Air Jordans could be a currency sometime in the future. And I mean, there's all these different things that we're looking at right now, and it's really changing. And that's what this episode is about looking at crypto as a currency for the future and what's going to need to happen in order to really start giving it the respect that it deserves and making it into a currency instead of just a commodity that people trade. And I thought you had an amazing perspective in that article, and I wanted to talk to you about that. So thank you for joining me.
Great. Oh, thanks for having me on, and thanks for reading.
Well, everybody else should read it too, and make sure I link it to this video because I think it's a fascinating read. But tell me a little bit about where you came up with the idea for the article, and how did you come about that idea, and where did you start with to write that article?
I don't know where I got that idea from. I think I got it out of a book, like an actual one that you get at this place called a library. It's like really weird. They've got like loads
an analog idea if there ever was one, right?
There, yeah. So, I think it was, I don't know, I was just reading a book and I just read that quote from Henry Stanley, who said that he had brought these three things. It was wire, cloth, and beads, and he had like 200 porters, and he had trunkfuls of these things, and he schlepped them all the way into the interior of Africa, just speculating that he hoped that if they ran out of provisions, he would be able to trade one or more of those things for more provisions, basically as to use them as money. But he got there, they did run out of provisions, and nobody wanted his wire, cloth, or beads. He got close with the cloth. They were interested in the cloth, but it wasn't the right kind. I forgot what the right kind would have been, but whatever he brought was not the kind that they were interested in. So he was stuck. He had nothing, he guessed incorrectly and was in the interior of Africa and out of provisions and had nothing that any of the locals would trade for. So I like to make historical analogies. That's kind of how I figure out crypto.
And how did you equate that to, basically what Bitcoin is? Bitcoin is the beat of the 21st century, but a lot of people just don't put any value in it.
Yeah, well, yeah, when you're talking about a store of value, then essentially what you're doing is guessing what people in the future are going to want to trade for. So, in the same way that Henry Stanley was guessing what people in Central Africa were going to be willing to trade for when we are investing in stores of value where we're guessing what people of the future are going to be willing to trade for. And that's what everyone is doing in Bitcoin. The store of value use case for Bitcoin is making the assumption that people in the future will be willing to trade valuable things for it, right?
Well, and you make a point into the article saying you don't know what's going to happen. You can't possibly understand where the world's going to come down on the idea of using digital assets as a form of currency. But you do suppose in the article that, Air Jordans could be potentially something valuable to people someday. But, it's amazing how we place value in things that intrinsically just don't have a lot of value, which is paper money, for example. I mean, we all imagine that the dollar has some kind of real value, but it really doesn't. It's just paper that the federal government says it is. And ultimately, that could be the same thing that happens with all the different cryptocurrencies, correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, traditionally there's the three-pronged definition of a currency, which is medium of exchange, unit of account, and store of value. And people often say like the dollar is not a currency because it's not a store of value, so therefore it doesn't fulfill all three prongs. But historically, nothing has fulfilled all three prongs. It's pretty much impossible to be both a means of exchange and a store of value. Those are kind of contradictory things. So I don't think that cryptos have to be all of those things. They can pick, any one of those three and be a useful currency. Bitcoin is placing its bets on being a store of value. But whether it is a good store of value or not is not really a function of whether it turns out to be a useful currency. I personally don't really see it as a store of value. I personally see Bitcoin as insurance against hyperinflation. So it's kind of like buying credit default swaps on the US on US treasuries or something like that. And that's partly because of just the way that it's played out over the last 9 months or so. Bitcoin has not been any kind of hedge against the 9% inflation that we've had, which has been disappointing to people. But I don't think Bitcoin was ever going to be a hedge against inflation. I think it's the hedge against hyperinflation. So to me, what Bitcoin is an insurance policy in case the U.S. dollar, genuinely collapses, whether the government defaults or it de facto defaults via hyperinflation. That's when that to me is the use case for Bitcoin. But that doesn't necessarily make it a great store of value. If we just have 5% inflation from now until forever, I'm not sure that Bitcoin will do, great in that scenario.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about the fact that gold at one time was, because it is not paper, it is not glass, it's not, it can't degrade. It's one of those things. That's one of the reasons why it gives it intrinsic value, which is not something you can say about Bitcoin. But do you think that was that part of the thinking process? You think when Satoshi Nakamoto came up with the idea that Bitcoin's going to come in and rock the world in terms of currency, and is that a reason why people should get involved in crypto now?
I mean, I still think that payments is the killer use case for crypto, in my opinion, still, and that is the very first line of the Satoshi white paper. So I don't think that Satoshi had store of value in mind, really. I think he had payments in mind mostly, and that has been fulfilled to some degree by the Lightning Network, which maybe hasn't really caught on as much as people hoped it would do. It's being fulfilled by USDC, which is not what crypto people want, because that is highly centralized and they're just digital dollars, and we want non-digital dollars. But like I said earlier, the store of value function of a currency is not that compatible with the means of exchange prong of being a currency. So I don't think Bitcoin was ever going to be both a medium exchange and a store of value. And in I guess it was 2017, I guess, when the block size debate and the community decided on small block sizes, and that was deciding in favor of making Bitcoin a store of value and not a means of exchange, which to me was a little bit of a divergence away from what Satoshi probably intended in the beginning.
Well, and that's an interesting question. I mean, so many people right now look at cryptocurrency investing as kind of it's a gamble. It's monopoly money. It's not real money, so they just have a good time with it. But that was not the envisionment for the original idea behind Bitcoin. It was really designed to be a currency, and I think that all comes down to confidence. Will people have the confidence to really buy a gallon of milk with crypto, and will businesses get the confidence to accept that as a form of payment for something? Some are starting to do it now, but it's not taken on in a universal way. Is that what's required for this thing to really turn into a currency?
I don't know. I think I think that probably the best chance for crypto to become a genuine currency is probably going to occur on the Ethereum network with L2s and USDC and whatever competitors to USDC, which again is, I know, not what crypto natives want to hear. But again, I think that's for the reason that it's just very difficult to have the same thing be a means of exchange and a store of value. I think you have to pick one or the other. Crypto people will like that chart that shows how the dollar is devalued and 99% over 100 years or something. But you're not supposed to just bury your dollars in the backyard. You're supposed to do something with them, and almost anything that you do with them, be it real estate or equities or bonds, whatever, that's going to retain the purchasing power. Which you mentioned Air Jordans earlier. Like, I jokingly said Air Jordans could be a means of exchange, but obviously that wouldn't really work out so well. The other person would have to have the right size, and it'd be difficult. But Air Jordans they are a store of value. Not so much the sneakers themselves; they might be. The ones from the '80s are. But when you buy stock in Nike, that to me is a store of value, because people in the future are going to give you fiat for Air. They're going to give fiat to Nike for their Air Jordans at whatever rate fiat is trading at in the future. So that makes Nike, to my mind, a store of value, which is doesn't make it a currency, but I don't think that you can be both.
Well, this is a pretty heady topic for my lowbrow show, which we usually just do basic introductions into crypto. And I want to thank you for joining me today. But before I let you go, because I've taken a bunch of your time, and I do appreciate you giving me your time. What would be your advice to, say, the newbies out there that are looking at this and saying, I just can't trust crypto, or I just don't understand crypto, and what would be your advice to get them to be inspired to join on to this crypto revolution?
No, that's a tough one. I would say to get into it for the tech and the utility. I'm not convinced that it is a buy and hold asset class. So if you come into it with the expectation that you are going to find the next Solana and make 100-bagger, you're probably going to be disappointed. So I would say, crypto is so varied and diverse now. So I would say, poke around, find a project that you think is really interesting, and then just go down that rabbit hole and learn as much as you can about the tech and about the utility. But I would say don't come into it expecting that you're going to get rich quick, or that you're going to find the next Solana or whatever.
Well, that is some very sage advice, and I think that's exactly what everybody is telling us we should be doing with crypto right now. Sir, thank you so much for being here today. And I'm going to put your article up on the description of this tag, and I'm going to get the whole world to read that article, because I think it was such a brilliant article. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, that's all for now from the crypto news front. I am knee-deep in moving boxes right now and finding a place to live, so this week's episode is a bit abbreviated. Big thanks to our sponsor, Luma Wealth, and big thanks to you for watching and listening. I'll leave you with a brief look at Lake Quinault on the Olympic Peninsula, but while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.
Crypto Nightly News is a Charted Life production.